5:11 here in town, and I am excited and honored to say that the JACK Quartet, the dynamic, edgy, new music specialists made up of Christopher Otto, Austin Wooleman, John Pickford Richards, and Jay Campbell, who are here performing as part of the Winnipeg New Music Festival, have joined me here in the Diamond Lane. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, it is seriously my pleasure. So yesterday, we were talking about this off the air. I was at the Centennial Concert Hall, like I'm sure many of our listeners, for your Winnipeg debut. How'd it feel?
Well, it's amazing. It's an incredible audience that they have for the festival. It was a large crowd and incredibly attentive. It was really wonderful to get to share some new pieces with such a great crowd.
And I think the audience reciprocated that. And it was great seeing you up there for at least half of the show. I mean, we're gonna touch on the Haas a little bit more later on. But before we get to that, like you said, you're here as part of the Winnipeg New Music Festival. New music, something that you guys are champions of. I think it was the Financial Times who called you guys evangelists of new music. What motivates you to perform the music that you do?
I think mostly it just has to do with being curious. We're all classically trained, and so we grew up playing Mozart and Beethoven. But really, like, meeting other humans who are composing music is just really exciting, and they ask us to do things that we've never been able to imagine ourselves, and it helps us to grow as a quartet.
And you guys have been performing together, since 2005, right? But in this current setup, since 2016, I'm wondering, like, I feel like a kind of a square guy, you know? Like, I like my 151, I like my ABA, I like my sonata form. In traveling and in doing all that you do, is there one thing where you keep hearing that is most misunderstood about new music? I use the air quotes very gently.
I feel like the most misunderstood thing is probably that it's like out of reach or is difficult to understand. Like the idea that you need, like deep technical understanding to appreciate the music itself, I think is something that I don't agree with. I think that people respond more positively to contemporary music than we musicians or concert hall presenters, I think, give them credit for.
I totally agree. Chris, you're nodding your head along. Is there something you want to add to that? That's something that you guys have come across in performing that just regularly comes up after a performance? People walk up to you and say, like, hey, I never thought of it that way, or something to that effect.
Yeah, I think we're oftentimes surprised at how much reaction people can get out of the visceral qualities of music. And obviously there's a lot of structural things that are going on in the mind of the composer, and we can talk about the theory of it, but when you're actually sitting there listening to these sounds, you can just totally be overwhelmed by the new kinds of experiences that you're having. And I think the more people open themselves up to it, the more they get out of it. And children, for example, often are very receptive to the kinds of music that we play because they're not as tied to the expected forms. Yeah, you don't have that preconceived notion of where it's going, right? It offers you that new experience. I mean, to me, one of the most frustrating things is almost the term itself. Like, it's a catch-all to 100 years of music where I would say in the last 100 years there's been more diverse music written than ever. And I think the Winnipeg New Music Festival, put on by the WSO with Alexander Micklethwaite and the composer-in-residence Harry Stefalakis, curated by Matthew Patton, is really showcasing that diversity this year. Like, we were talking about that just off the air. It's a really great opportunity to find something for you, which is really, really neat. I want to talk about your Winnipeg debut yesterday because it offered a great cross-section on contemporary music, from the minimalism of Glass to the what is it, new complexity of Fernie Howe. I think he's like the father of new complexity. And then, everything, the Schroeder and the Haas in between. Let's start with Glass, as he is the feature of the WNMF this year. How did that all come about? How did you guys get the opportunity to premiere a work of his?
I mean, we feel really fortunate because we all grew up listening to Glass's quartets. There's this Kronos Quartet album, so the way it all worked was that he's in residence at Carnegie Hall this year, and Carnegie asked if we would be game to premiere a new quartet by him, and then I believe Carnegie and WNMF were in touch, and they co-commissioned it together. And so this is actually the world premiere last night. And it's sort of great. It's so nostalgic for me personally to be playing it. And what I wanted is exactly what we got, like an incredibly sentimental Glassian string quartet.
I think that you summed it up, this sentimental quality to it. That was John Pickford Richards, the violist in the ensemble, speaking. For the rest of you, was there something else that you noted in the music of Glass that made it extra special? I mean, there is that nostalgic quality to it, right? He is one of the poster boys of minimalism, really, that way. Does it ever get old, premiering new works of living composers? Does that ever, like, rub off?
It doesn't get old, because I think what excites us about doing things is the idea that style is still being created right now, things that are unfettered or in interesting ways building on the styles of the past in all sorts of different combinations of expressiveness or coolness or craziness or whatever it is, that can never get old, because that's what art is all about.
Yeah, it's constantly growing and changing and adapting depending on what's going on and these extraneous influences as well. So, like you said, I mean, I really enjoyed the Glass. I had a great time listening to it. I found it really engaging. Also on the program was music of Sabrina Schroeder, who really showcased some of the more extended techniques, I guess, as well as the Brian Ferneyhough. I want to ask you a little bit about that. Have you ever come across a score and gone, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do here? You know, either like physically or mentally or something that way, where you just go, this is a challenge.
Yeah, well, all the time, actually.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, and it's happened so frequently that I've gotten used to the sensation of looking at some score and saying, I have no idea how I'm actually going to do this. What are they even asking? Because people are reinventing notation. They're reinventing the way we play our instruments. And that's part of the fun of it, though, is decoding, like in multiple steps, you know, decoding the notation and then figuring out how to internalize it into our bodies and make it into a kind of muscle memory, and how to make it into music and an expressive kind of event. And I think that whole interpretive process is so rich.
I think I read somewhere, Jay, that you've played double stops with your chin before. Is that a thing that you've had to do on certain scores?
Yeah, that's true.
Xenakis or something?
No, that was. Oh yeah, actually, there was Xenakis, and then there's also a piece by Aaron Gee that that I have to play with my chin. I had a little chin callus for a while.
No way.
Yeah, I think that's kind of
First for everything.
A little bit of a mantra of the quartet that, like, we don't really ever say out loud that, like, that's not possible.
Yeah.
I mean, there's certain things that, you know, are not going to be possible, but many things that are said to be unplayable, whatever, later turn out to be playable. And so, like, I think as a quartet, each one of us finds whatever way we can to realize what the composer wants, even if it's doing ridiculous things like playing with your chin.
Yeah, it's just bringing that level of preparation, right? And really studying that score and working through it. I think the Georg Friedrich Haas took that level of preparation to a whole other level, I would say. So to set the stage for listeners who weren't there yesterday, in the second half of the concert, you guys took the stage, no music stands or anything, which immediately, you know, seeing a string quartet walk up there, I was like, oh no, what's going to happen? Like, it's very exciting. And then from there, the lights are turned off, and for about 45 minutes or so, as the work is, you guys perform, we listened in complete darkness. How did you go about preparing for that? Did you perform? Like, did you start the preparation as an individual and then bring it together as a group? I mean, how did that all come about?
Well, we're very familiar with Haas's music and have been performing it for years. So we did come together kind of in a regular rehearsal process at the start after looking at the score and kind of examining the demands as you always would on your own. We came together and just started learning it, and over time playing bigger and bigger chunks of the 45-minute work, and eventually starting to rehearse with blindfolds on.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, the way that the piece is composed lends itself to performing in the dark for the most part. It's composed with that in mind, and so the types of musical materials and gestures in the piece lend themselves to doing it without vision. Additionally, I think you just discover as you start to remove vision as a cue that there's a lot more that's possible and a lot more that you can hear that you often are not aware of. And I think that's one of the strengths of the piece is it's an expanding of the perception and a zooming in on these sounds in a way that is really intense.
I think I enjoyed a lot of things about it, but what I really enjoyed was just this idea that it was 45 minutes, and there were moments of really active listening where I was like, okay, I gotta figure something out here, and then I would just totally drift off, and then I'd come back and be like, whoa, where'd the cello go? Like, where did the pits go in this bit? And you just come back and you grab something new each time. It's just a very transcendent sort of quality to it. You just get lost in it, and you get lost in it in a different way than just having headphones over your ears, right? To you guys, what's important about playing for a live audience?
That's everything. I love the live audience, and that energy is it's the be all end all of making music for me. I mean, recording is important. It's important to have these documents of pieces, and it's pushed forward the art form in many, many ways. But there's still an inescapable aspect of music making that can only happen live. It's the only way we really discover these pieces too. You can rehearse them as a group beforehand, but they don't come to light until you put them on stage. You try to imagine it. You get good at imagining it by performing a lot over the years, but even then, you still don't know the piece until you've played it on stage a few times, and the audience and the energy between you and the audience begins to really reveal what the piece is about and what it means.
Yeah, it really is. There's something new each time, too, right? It continues to live. It continues to grow. So I guess the last thing I want to ask you is, you guys take the stage again tonight, this time with the WSO. You're going to be doing the Canadian premiere of Pascal Dussapin's Hinterland. What can you tell us about the work? How was the rehearsal? You guys did it? What can you tell us about it?
It's kind of like a shred fest. It's really intense.
A shred fest?
Yeah, it's like
nice.
Like it rocks pretty hard. It's fun.
And like it rocks in what kind of way? Like both in terms of technique and in terms of meter and rhythm and just an overall drive that brings it forward?
Yeah, it has an extremely obsessive quality, I think.
Oh, nice.
Like, it's very rhythmic, very driving, and staying within one harmony for a very long time. And there are these 4 episodes called exhaustion attempts, I guess. And
a challenge accepted,
they're kind of
I guess.
like the cadenzas of the quartet, and then the whole orchestra comes in to reinforce that. But it's really unrelenting.
Wow. So you listening, you can see the JACK Quartet performing in tonight's Winnipeg New Music Festival final show, The Next World. It takes place at 7:30 p.m. at the Centennial Concert Hall. Guys, I want to thank you so much for coming by the Classic 107 studio. It was a real pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Sam.
Thanks.
So the last thing I'm going to get you to do is I've got a selection kind of queued up here, some music of John Luther Adams. We're going to hear The Wind in High Places. What can you tell us about this second movement, if you want to set it up for us?
Well, these 3 pieces were written by John Luther Adams for commemorating specific people in his life in specific places. And this is McLaren Summit is a high peak that he went to with one of his dear friends who passed away. And it has it's actually a kind of a 4-part canon in tempos. Each of us is playing in a different speed, the same material. And the entire piece uses only open strings and natural harmonics, so our fingers never actually touch the fingerboard in this.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's also a palindrome, also, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Here is the JACK Quartet on Winnipeg's Classic 107.